Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is Kid Nate at BloodyElbow.com, and I've got a special treat for you. We're here with Eugene Robinson, the author of Fight, everything you ever wanted to know about ass kicking, but were afraid you get your ass kicked for asking. Thanks for joining us, Eugene.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Where are you today?
Right now, I just finished training. I'm at Sorrow Academy, Team Sorrow in Mountain View, California. So,
Mountain View, California. That
you
sounds...
can tell. You can tell I just finished training because now I've got a flipper.
ouch. You dislocated a pinky there?
No, I ruptured a tendon in my little finger, so that if I was to hold up my little finger, the top just falls over. Yeah.
I thought they had Viagra for that, but...
Yeah, you're not the first one to make that joke. You know,
I use stale material. I think I even plagiarized that off somebody talking to you on Facebook about it. But
right. Yeah, it doesn't hurt, but I got to wear a splint. So, of course, the idea was I should wear a splint and not train, but fuck that.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to cover, this is a MMA Tete-A-Tete. Luke Thomas can't be here. He's having his honeymoon, so Eugene,
you see, that guy lacks a certain amount of commitment, you know.
I know, he's putting his family first. I don't know what to say.
Fool.
Another thing he does, he puts his Spike show ahead of my show. Like, they only reach 100, maybe 1,000 times more viewers, but
you know what?
Some people, I don't know.
I'm not impressed with those numbers.
I'll let him know that.
Yeah.
All right, so the topics we're going to cover today, we're going to look back at UFC 152. We're gonna talk about Jones versus Belfort mostly, a little bit about Bisping versus Stan, and the flyweight title fight. We're also gonna look ahead to UFC on Fuel 5. Eugene's gonna give us his picks for the main card, and so am I. And we're gonna ask, given the cancellation of Strikeforce Melendez versus Healy, we're gonna ask, should Zuffa just throw in the towel, cancel the whole Strikeforce event, get out of their Showtime card? And is UFC giving up on the UK? So that's because UFC on Fuel 5 is going to be in England. So let's start with UFC 152. What did you think of the event overall, Mr. Eugene?
I was at the event, fortunate enough to be there, and I tell you something that was very strange. It was one of those events that caused me to feel my soul die within my body.
That is quite
I don't know if you watched it on TV. I am unsure of what kind of an experience you had. But I got there nice and early. I'm one of those freaks. I get there nice and early. I did not miss a single card on the fight. For every bright spot, every Cub Swanson, there was, the Roger Hollits. And the formula is well documented. You take local guys because then they have a local investment. That morning in Toronto, the Toronto paper was claiming that sales were sluggish, and it took a long time for everybody to get there. So people were kind of filtering in as some of the major fights. But, a disease that I see, and I, as the sport ages, I see it more and more. I see guys who fight like they train. And by this, I mean, there's a certain amount of camaraderie. Yeah, you maybe want to high-five a guy after a good exchange. But these guys are they're not hitting for the fences. They're not, they are not fighting, they're training. And to be rewarded by an audience that you think has come to see a fight, that's fine, I mean, they tried to change the rules in hockey. It almost ruined hockey, I'm not in the cage. I'm not going to presume to advise these guys on how to fight. But, if people want to pay to see you train, your gym would be full, and after all that is said and done, John Jones and Belfort remind you, all of a sudden my soul was alive in my body again, remind you of why it's super enjoyable to begin with, because it's a philosophical, kind of, it's a philosophical take on the indomitable nature of the human spirit, and that's why we like sports, because at the end of it, nobody has to die to make this philosophical point that we all need made, which is, all things through the spirit. So it was a roller coaster ride for me. There were bright spots. And I think the fact, that Dana White's negative reaction about the public's response to the flyweight, it has nothing to do with the fact that those guys are flyweight. I don't know where he was sitting, but he completely missed Demetrius Johnson fought a smart, safe fight, and then Benavidez at the end of it, you could see that his face was actually did take some damage, but it's just not volleyball. This is fighting. People want to see fights, manifest themselves in a certain way, and what they want to see are guys who want to win. Not guys who want to outpoint each other, not guys who just want to train a little bit harder than the other guy, but guys who want to vanquish, and Demetrius Johnson turned in a workmanlike performance. He didn't turn in a star performance. And when you got a guy in the UFC who has a belt, most of the time that means that guy's a star. He's not a workman. He's a star. He's not outpointing people, with the exception for GSP. And you'll notice, if you were there, I don't know what they sweetened up with the audio on TV, but if you were there, every time they showed GSP, they could have showed Dick Van Dyke for the kind of audience response you got. There was no audience response.
For GSP, wow.
Toronto. No audience response for GSP. It's in Toronto,
But what I was reading in the Wrestling Observer, Meltzer was saying that John Jones was getting much louder boos than the flyweight fight got. Was that what you?
Correct, and that raises another point that I've been hammering away at, and that's that America, and by extension we could just say North America, that this is all this claim we don't really love winners. But we don't. I mean, they were looking for a reason to hate Jones forever. Rashad Evans, the most confused man in MMA, finally came up with one. And he was like, well, the guy is cocky. The guy won 17 fights. He's got a right to be cocky. It's like when Usain Bolt was celebrating in the Olympics and they talked to a guy who comes in second or third place, or an American guy, and they said, what do you think about that? He's out there grandstanding, calling himself, and he just kind of looks and he said, the guy is the fastest man in the world. I think the fastest man in the world should be allowed to celebrate being the fastest man in the world, unless you're faster. So Rashad Evans gives it. And that, I'm sorry let's digress a bit. The Rashad Evans being irked about John Jones' ascendancy is ridiculous. When he cleared the way for John Jones to fight by, Greg Jackson says, would you mind? They did him a courtesy by asking if he minded, even if they were going to ignore him. Do you mind John Jones fighting Shogun for the belt? And he says, no, go ahead. He knew there was a 50% chance that the guy was going to walk out of there with a belt. And so then I guess he said, he got irked a little bit when the guy stood up and said, I'll fight anybody that the UFC puts me in front of. I guess contrast that with Anderson Silva and John Jones. People talk about a super fight between those two, and they're like, I don't really want to fight him. He was so far out of thinking about Rashad Evans at that point, it was an understandable mistake, but that's all it took for all this resentment that Evans had. And Evans was never a crowd favorite before, but he became a crowd favorite because he gave voice to something that people wanted to say, which was, we really hate winners. And John Jones is a winner. The guy saved the old lady who was mugged on the day of a fight. You show me any other professional athlete who's extended himself beyond himself like that. We should love this guy, and they hate him. And now they have a reason. And Dana White's whole thing with throwing him under the bus for the demise of 151 was a terrible, terrible, horrible mismanagement. It never should. I don't like Don King so much and these boxing but nobody should have ever done that. No, Roger Goodell, nobody should have ever done that, because if John Jones loses that fight against Sonnen, there's no love for John Jones. It's like, oh man, too bad. Better luck next time. I was contracted to show up to fight the old guy. The old guy got hurt. There's that fight,
I'm surprised to hear you say. I thought you were going to say fake instead of cocky. What do you think about the fake charges, especially in relation to the DWI?
Yeah, who cares if he's fake? What do you think? You think any of these other guys are legit?
I believe everything they say, Eugene.
You've been in the sport. There's some guys who the characters there that they display when the cameras are on are very close to the characters that they display when the camera's up. But there are some guys who you don't even recognize the same guy, and they clean a lot of these guys up. Remember, Chuck Liddell passed out in the middle of a TV interview, man. Yeah,
it's a classic moment. We run it on Bloody Elbow all the time.
He was sick. Yeah, I got a word for that, man.
All right, so let's talk about the title fight. What did you think about Jones' performance versus Vitor Belfort?
Well, you know what? I keep wishing that John Jones. I mean, I come from a punk rock tradition, like the stuff I've written for Bloody Elbow, where people start saying, this guy, go to hell. They don't really, I love collective hatred, especially as it's directed toward me. It seems like as a mark that John Jones is really a good guy. When he came in and I was shocked. There was so many boos. The bass response in the auditorium, it was in Air Canada Center was astounding. And it actually seemed he fought like a guy, like this was something for him to get over. Like it actually bothered him, I mean, to me, I'd be like, yeah, you and I hate you, But, I'm not a professional fighter. So it seemed like once he got over that, so he was with an audience who was against him, management difficulties, a guy he wasn't scheduled to fight as a kind of a makeup fight, other fighters attacking him. This was shit that the guy had to get out of his head. His parents were there. Come on, this all starts to weigh on you, The next day, his brothers are playing again. There's a lot of stuff interfering. And given that, the guy rose to the occasion. He fought a great fight. And not only did he fight a great fight, but he advanced interest in his next fight by revealing, I mean, I'm sure he didn't set out to get caught in the armbar, but him getting caught in the armbar was suddenly like a light goes off in the heads of the competitors. It's like, oh yeah, his jiu-jitsu is kind of actually soft, And then to put an exclamation point on it, he says afterward, my jiu-jitsu is kind of soft. I guess so all the guys who are strong jiu-jitsu guys are like, I got to get in there. Let me get in there before John Jones. I need to get in there in 2012, 2013 before the guy closes these holes, So if I'm a light heavyweight guy, yeah, I'd start thinking very, very seriously about that.
What do you think of Belfort's performance? Could you see the armbar very well from where you were?
I could not see it very well from where I was, but Belfort's. I was sitting with a bunch of Brazilian guys, and one of the guys made the point that I thought was pretty interesting. He said, there's a difference between Vitor Belfort and Frank Mir, and again, it's a difference between training and fighting. These guys were of the opinion, and it's an opinion that I share, that if Frank Mir had put that arm bar on it, John Jones would have his arm in a fucking cast now. But Vitor Belfort was, trains a lot. Probably he said he heard the popping, and when he heard the popping, what did he do? He sort of loosened up, and that's fine if you want to do that. When Matt Hughes fought Royce Gracie, and you could see Royce's body relax, and he had made the decision, there's no way in the world I'm being tapped by an arm bar that this guy learned from my family. No, he just said the arm's going to go. He had just and then you could see Matt Hughes do this calculation like, this guy's really going to make me break his arm, And, as hated as Matt Hughes is, even he wasn't willing to go that. He took a chance. I figure I can take him some other way, and he did. And I think Vitor loosened it up for long enough that given the mindset, he was done. I mean, John Jones said, I was not going to lose. I think the quote was, I wasn't going to lose my belt to an armbar. That's the kind of shit that people should be saying. Not only does John Jones show you Babe Ruth stuff in the cage, stuff you've never seen. I've been following this sport since the very first one, even before that, stuff that you've never seen, but an attitude like that, you name any other fighters who would say, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice the arm and I'm going to win this fight. Who?
Nogueira pops to mind.
Would. There are a few guys out there who would, but, and he didn't say it. It wasn't, oh, he's fake. He didn't say it to be calculating. I think he was speaking from his heart. He was like, yeah, when I was in there, I could feel it. And you look at the pictures. I've looked up like the Zapruder film. I've looked at the photos, not the video, the photos. And you can see there's a point at which it hurts enough. And he's like, fuck it. He's got his, clearly it's like, let it go. I'm convinced with the 3 limbs I have left that I can take this guy. And that's the kind of shit, all the guys that were screaming at him, screaming, pussy, pussy, after he won the fight, they all filed out silently. There was one guy left standing there screaming into the night, pussy, pussy.
And that was you?
Of the opposition. These people are insane, we have in English a word for this. Our love for the loser. We call them lovable losers. We love it. What people love the Boston Red Sox until they start winning the World Series. Now nobody gives a fuck about the Boston Red Sox.
What did you think of Belfort? I took some criticism for getting onto him for pulling guard. It seemed like every time he connected with some punches, he flopped to his back.
You know what? There was after it was clear, after the armbar was slipped at one point, he was getting it really good, and he pulled the guard. You know what? I'm fine. I'm a luta livre, Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy myself. But it wasn't. Just from that point of view, it was a lousy guard to pull. It was like he's just falling on the ground, man. You couldn't do that training with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys. It's called pulling guard. It's not falling down on the ground and the guy just happens to be standing between your legs.
What did you think of the Americana at the end?
You know what? I didn't see it coming. But I trained with a guy who's like big, like John's, like tall, thin, and so when he started putting it on, I was like, having been in that position before, he's done, man. He's the leverage points. He was done, and it was. I think it was solidly applied. I mean, there's a temptation to say that maybe it was artless because he muscled his way through it, but this is not ADCC. This is MMA, So it was. I don't say Vitor lacks heart. I mean, I think it was put on pretty tight. Elbow was in close to the body. It was all right. I mean, Vitor is a 35-year-old man. I mean, the youth will have its say, and I'm a 50-year-old fighter myself, but I'm. If I'm fighting in a competition and I beat a guy who's 28, I think I give myself credit for that, So I think Vitor was always one of my faves. I think he did a good job. But, I don't know what the UFC is really thinking. Bonner fighting Silva. I mean, I think that these are names that people know, but they're going to get these guys fucking hurt. And I think a better use of their time is to develop a farm team. The TV show, clearly, given the numbers of the TV show, not going to be a reliable resource for doing a farm team. They need to do like a fan expo thing, maybe the night before the show, like you can come to the press conference, you can come to the weigh-in, and you need to do this thing where open tryouts, man. Something where you can like discover tomorrow's talent today, because that's only part of it. Artisan development is another part of it. But they need to build for tomorrow, and just moving into different geos is not going to be the case. But nobody's asking me,
Yeah, I want to run this theory of mine past you. Like, I think one of the issues they have, compared with boxing, which is boxing's cultivating this new generation of stars. We saw Sergio Martinez, Sal Alvarez emerging as big-time box office draws, or at least TV draws. I think they both did well at the gate, too. And these are guys that have been sheltered throughout their career. Their opponents have been carefully picked to cultivate them as a boxer. Whereas then I look at somebody like Evan Dunham. 2.5 years ago, this was a kid people thought had title prospects. And here he is losing a tough fight to TJ Grant, and I feel like these kids get...
Should have lost, but whatever. Yeah.
We'll have to go back to revisit that one. But I feel like they're being thrown to the wolves a little bit. They're not being cultivated. I'd rather see the UFC tighten the roster. Like, have 16 guys in each division per year. Let those guys fight amongst themselves over the course of that year. And then at the end of the year, cut the guys that didn't make the cut. Let the guys who stayed in stay. That way you get to know the fighters more. And it's not just this endless sea of mediocre 1-0, 2-0 guys in the UFC coming and going. Or really good fighters coming in, getting 2 fights and going. What do you think of that?
You know what? You're missing the essential X factor. Let's call it the Kimbo Slice factor. That the system you're suggesting would have weeded out Kimbo Slice. Kimbo Slice was a big box office draw. Every time he does anything, even still now, it's a big box office draw. Could Don Fry compete in the modern UFC? Don Fry is not competitive in the modern UFC, but if you put Don Fry in a fight, You could swap out a Stephen Bonner and put in you could 5 Stephen Bonners and put in a Don Fry, and people would be interested. I mean, these guys were personalities, they were personages. How you can't train for that, man. You can't. This is boxing has a built-in constituent. Boxing is like the Republican Party at this point. The diehards who care about boxing are just have existential concerns about boxing, about whether it's going to exist in the future, and they really want it to exist. These guys are not capturing the hearts and minds of people. We still haven't seen another Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali. There's been nobody to capture this kind of magic in boxing. Klitschko's a great, that nobody has this kind of an a primal emotional connection to what the person represents, and you can't TV show that up. You can't, you can't train that up. You can't, where does that come from? It comes from casting a net that's really wide, and maybe somebody emerges as a personality. I mean, John Jones has got kind of a pablum personality. He's a nice guy. He's really a nice guy. He's not I wish he'd be more comfortable being a heel, but I think despite all the talk about him being a fake, I think he's genuinely at base root a nice guy. His father's like a minister or something. He's a nice guy, But what he does in the cage is phenomenal, and it rises above. So people kind of he's one of the top off his trust. Anderson Silva, pretty nice guy. Stuff he does in the cage is great. I mean, think about Wes Sims, for example. Wes Sims was one of the losingest fighters in the UFC, kept fighting. Why? Fought exciting fights. I mean, it's weird. Now you're talking about Chael Sonnen. Somebody finally said, how are you going to deny Nick Diaz a shot against Anderson Silva and try to hustle Chael Sonnen to the front of the line against John Jones? Come on. So, I mean, I think it's stage management on Dana White's part. I don't think he really wants a Nick Diaz holding a belt. Diaz puts a lot of asses in the seats, so a squandered resource. He's like, oh, well, it might be a squandered resource, but I can't control Nick Diaz. Therefore, I do not, Tito was one of the guys he couldn't control. They made their peace. He became a company guy, but you're going to have to run that risk. People want to see Nick fight specifically because he's out of control and he's good, so, and he's not making believe. That's the thing. You can't take some guys like, who's that guy? Junie Brown, who's probably like a trouble guy on the Ultimate Fighter TV show. Great personality, great reality TV personality. The guy wasn't putting it out in the cage, but people would have wanted to see him. So, I mean, it's really, baseball can cruise on being boring. You have boring games and Nolan Ryan's around, Manny Rivera's on the downside. But you're really going to have to open this up and have because these young Turks, they will emerge, And the UFC, you're right. They have a really bad I'm always mispronounce his name. Sukaju. The guy had a lot of potential, man. Sukaju, yeah. He had a lot. Well, he had a lot of potential. Yeah, that's right. I'm here with Leopoldo Serrao. And he had a lot of potential, and they just threw him out there and messed up the guy's head, and now the guy is nowhere. I mean, that's why when John Jones says, somebody's got to pay attention to John Jones, it's clear that it's not necessarily going to be my bosses. It's my coach, me, my family. I think he's doing the right thing. There are lots of guys, who came out. Chris Lieben came out yesterday and said, I am broke. This is a 38, however old Chris Lieben is. Wait, 32. 30-year-old. He's broke. Broke. Ward is not broke. Broke, man. That means when he goes to the bed, that means he's got to get 57 cents worth of gas like I did yesterday,
Yeah, that's an ugly position to be in. Lieben's had some legal difficulties, I think, have eaten into his savings.
Who among us hasn't taken too many pills?
Not going to cast stones.
Oh, had some legal difficulties. He's doing all right. So, but.
Let's segue to UFC on Fueled this Saturday. We got Stefan Struve versus Stipe Miocic, Dan Hardy versus Amir Sadola, John Hathaway versus John McGuire, Brad Pickett versus Yves Dubuin, and Paul Sass versus Matt Wiman. Any thoughts on that card? Which fights are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to them all. I think Struve Struve is a golden boy, and I think they want him to win it. But I think outside of what they want, I think he will actually win it because I don't think Miocic, whose name I'm mispronouncing, I'm sure has Miocic. He says I don't think he's got enough of. I don't think he has a comparable skill set. He's got a puncher's chance, but I don't think he's gonna pull it out. In any case, Struve has managed to impress me, but he's managed to impress me as like a guy who's doing something special in there. He's not just a grinder.
What about his chin? You concerned with Struve's chin?
No, actually, there's been some concern. I'm not. Where I'm concerned. I was concerned at the latter day Liddell. I was concerned about his chin because your brain starts to learn. I was concerned about my chin after the first time I got knocked out. And because your brain is like making decisions like, time to go to sleep. And when somebody's got a glass jaw, they lose their chin. It's when the brain is like developed this kind of neural pathway where it goes, when this happens, I will do this. And so I don't think Struve is young enough. I don't think he's been able to. I don't think he's damaged goods yet. So, but if get tested, it's gonna get tested. Or then you have maybe like something like that Cub Swanson thing, man. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, that was a very impressive performance. I did not see that coming at all.
And when John Jones kicked Belfort, and it was that delayed reaction where Belfort kind of fell. Yeah, a body shot you understand because the force moves through your midsection is to hit your liver, and you go, oh God! If you train, you've been in that situation. But I've been knocked out, but my knockout was very direct. It was never like somebody hit me in the face, and then 15 seconds later, after standing, I fell on the ground. Man, that was very strange. But so the other fights on Fuel, what were they? I'm sorry.
We got and let's only talk about the ones you find interesting. I think there's some not so great fights on this card, but we got Dan Hardy versus Marisa Dola.
Dan Hardy is a friend of Knuckle Up. Of course, I got my own radio show on combatmusicradio.com. It's called Knuckle Up. So Hardy has come on the show. He's the only art student fighter out there. I guess Joaquin Hansen is also former art student, kind of. I mean, in Norway it was illegal, so he used to have his fights in art galleries. But Sadala, I'm going to go with Hardy on this one, but it's unsound. My pick is unsound because it's driven by voodoo. Voodoo that is driven by is, I believe Dan Hardy has come to a crucial point in his career where he's got to win this fight or start to think about opening his own gym. And I don't think the pressure is the same on Sadala. So
I can't argue.
I think British fighters have a because there's no wrestling. Even though Billy Riley's Snake Pit and all the catch wrestling back in Wigan, England, I don't think it's maintained a tradition in wrestling that has given these guys a leg up. But I think he's spent his time profitably. Some guys do. I've hated Bisping since he robbed the deaf guy.
Matt Hamill.
But he's actually, this last fight, I called it for him, and he's actually earned my respect because each time he comes back, he's a little bit better than before. He's educable, which is something some of these fighters, it's like, oh, you got caught. I mean, look, I like Chael Sonnen too, but look at Chael Sonnen's losses, and they show a guy who is not learning. Not only not learning, but actively resisting learning. These guys, these wrestlers, why don't they put the time in learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Are they kidding? Vitor Belfort at one point called Daryl Golar down to Rio to train with wrestling. He thought about this for 6 months. Come on, you won't get an American wrestler guy who was willing to train with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach for 6 months. Come on, so much so that when the guy starts slapping on a fucking triangle that turns into an armbar, you don't. Oh, I wonder what's gonna happen now. What's gonna happen now, Jack? Is you're gonna fucking lose. So you know.
Let's jump ahead to the Paul Sass versus Matt Wiman fight. You dropped some luta livre and Wigginham snake pit. I think Paul Sass is the only living exponent of both traditions. You think he's going to be able to triangle Matt Wiman like he's triangled everybody else?
Matt Wiman is strong, and you know what? I'm a catch wrestler, luta livre guy. You know, I know it says Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu behind my head, but Leopoldo Serral teaches us luta livre. But I've been disappointed with the guys who really, you know, who Josh Barnett, man, that last, you know, as a catcher, all the guys who were seriously into catch wrestling or luta livre kind of watched that last Josh Barnett fight and was like, man, again, a guy who, you know, against Cormier, if he had worked on entries, you know, yeah, once his stuff is in, he's in, and it's kind of interesting. Sasso, yeah, you know, I like Matt Wiman, but I don't think he's going to pull this out. So, but again, that's a voodoo pick for me.
What do you think Sass's ceiling is in the lightweight division in the UFC?
I don't know. I mean, you've got that. That's a hard question, man. That's a hard question because everybody who holds a belt, before there had been a good deal of changeability in the belt scenario. I think most of the guys who have the belt, I think the only place where you might see a little bit of action, okay, well, you got GSP and Condit coming up, so that's kind of a thing. And I think the heavyweights, it might be a few, but I'm seeing settle. Yeah, that I'm seeing that the guys who have the belts now are going to be there for a while.
Including Benson Henderson. You don't think Anthony Pettis can beat him again?
No, because he beat him, and he did so in a way that made the fucking highlight reels. So if you don't think that that Henderson is training every single day, thinking about avenging that loss, and as well. Keep in mind, Henderson doesn't feel like a champ, you know, because he didn't have a convincing win over Edgar. You know, it wasn't a clear win. He's got doubters, detractors. Compare Edgar against Maynard. You know, the first fight, I don't say Edgar won that one, but we got a big truck going by. But the second fight, he had something to prove, and he won it. You know, again, and I think he got two fights. Henderson has two fights against Edgar, neither one of which people felt like he conclusively won. And he's got this loss to Pettis. You know, I don't know what was going through Pettis' head. I mean, he could still be high off of that, you know, off the fence kick and the highlight reels. But I guarantee you, again, this is a guy who would rather. Henderson would rather die, than to lose to. I mean, there are not a lot of guys who say that. They're like, maybe I win, maybe I lose. You know, we can do a rubber match. You get the belt. It'll be some action. It'll be fun. No. So the emotional wherewithal that he's gonna bring it to that fight against Pettis, I think, like I said, I think that there'll be some play in the heavyweights, but I'm seeing everybody, and I think GSP. You know what? I didn't think Condit beat Nick, and I think Nick would have beat GSP. I'm not saying there's collusion. I'm just saying that I think GSP has a better chance of keeping his belt against Condit than he did against Nick. So, you know, I'm not saying it's a warm-up fight for him against Condit because Condit's really going to try, but I'm not getting the same fire from a Condit that I know would be there with Nick. And I don't know where GSP's head is, you know.
What do you think of GSP's chances versus Silva?
Oh, come on. This is not even a serious conversation, you know. All you need to know about that is to look at GSP's face every time they bring it up. Yeah, no. He keeps saying no, and Anderson Silva says, you know, if Dana wants it, I'll have to do it. There's no downside for him to that. You know, he drops away. He's like, man, I had the weight cut killed me, I guess. But he's not losing to GSP. I mean, GSP is a different type of fighter, man. I mean, he's one of those guys. Keep in mind, think of how exciting he was on the way up. And then think about how the latter day GSP was something that people were continually disappointed with because he did just enough to win. You know, this guy was enjoying the spoils of winning, the Rolls Royce and stuff like that. It messes with your head. Yeah.
You don't think Greg Jackson has an outsized role in that process?
I think Greg Jackson has. Greg Jackson has changed how coaches approach their fighters, and has changed how fighters approach the fight. And he's not a fire guy, you know. And part of that is good if you're a fire guy, to have a guy who's pretty cerebral. It's a nice balance. But if you're already kind of a cerebral guy and you're with him, you know, I mean, you name any of those latter day fights that GSP fought that were exciting. You know,
it's been a while. It's been a while.
Fight with Matt Serra, you know, both the one that where he lost and the one where he beat Serra, those were exciting, but they were exciting because of Matty, because Matty's a fire guy, you know, and that's why the fight with him and Nick. I don't know what. I mean, it'll happen, but that's a big fight, man. That's a big, exciting fight, and you know, win or lose, it's going to be a great fight. The Nick wins. I'm not a Diaz nut jumper. Win or lose. You know, I'm not saying that Nick's going to win that fight, but you know it's going to be an exciting fight, you know. I mean, you keep in mind, people, Rashad Evans, I have to go back to Rashad Evans and the John Jones thing. He's fake. People hated Rashad Evans for a long time because he was a really incredibly boring fighter. And suddenly he started hitting for the fences and he was like somebody to watch, you know. And he figured it out, too. It's like, I got to fight like I mean it, and then people will like me, you know.
Makes a big difference. Well, man, due to the loquaciousness of my guests, this has been awesome. I don't think I'll tell
you need to stop me. Some guy had me on his radio show. This is half an hour. 3 hours later, you know, like I was like the ODB of talk radio. I got to be yanked out of there, you know.
Well, this has been awesome. I think we can forego Strikeforce. Does anybody care about Strikeforce at this point?
This should not surprise anybody. They did the WEC. I thought for a while there that because of the deal with Showtime, which I'm sure Dana is interested in probably renegotiating, and also because of restraint of trade and monopoly practices, that they would keep it around so they could say, look, you know, we're not controlling the industry. We don't have monopolistic business practices. But nobody's being fooled. I mean, the UFC owns Strikeforce, so whether it existed on its own, it's not like it's a real competitive deal. It's Bellator. Bellator is the only thing standing between, you know, in the smaller fights, monopolistic control. So I think they will decommission Strikeforce. You know, I don't think there's any real interest in maintaining it. You know, it confuses and muddies the picture. So.
Well, one last topic that wasn't on our list, I just want to run past to get your take real quick. What do you think Bellator's chances when they go to Spike TV next year?
I think they're good, and I think as evidenced by the fact that they're good is Dana White in the last few days attacking both Spike as the worst TV station ever and Bellator all in. I think that those were strategic attacks, and you know, I think. I mean, look. Nobody's going to come in. Yeah, I mean, UFC is a big dog on the block, you know. But what Bellator and Spike will prevent the UFC from doing, or making it harder for the UFC to do, is to drill down, which is what they really need to do now. Yeah, you know, Macau is a big gambling center, you know, but it's not like, you know, East Asian MMA is going to be that big of a deal, you know. So, but they're putting a lot of money into the geographical locations. That makes sense. What they really need to do to keep the sport healthy, as they've discovered in the last few fights, you know, why when John Bones Jones go, does nobody want to see the other fights? Because the cards were soft. You know, you're going to have to develop this farm team. And now with the numbers coming back on the Ultimate Fighter show, you're going to have to. I mean, part of it is a show, and part of it is people less interested in reality TV. But you're going to have to do something. And going wide is not always necessary. They need to go deep. But now they've got Bellator, they've got Spike, maybe muddying the picture when they try to go deep. So I understand him being irked, you know. But But all in all, I think it'll be good for the sport. I mean, when I say good for the sport, I mean good for the process of having real, natural, stunning talents making themselves, known and available to us, the fans. So.
Well, cool. Well, thanks very much for being on the show. Let's let you plug your shit one last time. Eugene Robinson, author of Fight, everything you want to know about getting your ass kicked. We were afraid you'd get your ass kicked for asking. Anything else you want to plug in your radio shows? Or
That's almost right. Yeah, combatmusicradio.com. We're having server problems, but you can still see our Facebook page is KMBT. Yes, you get my video shows up there, my take, Oxbow CDs through iTunes. And this is my coach. It's Leopoldo Serral. So if you're in Northern California, you want to train, do some MMA, Luta Livre, this is the place to do it. So, but anyway, thank you for having me.
it's been a pleasure, and it'll be interesting to see how the quarrelsome and cranky Bloody Elbow readership reacts to somebody who's not Luke Thomas being my partner on the Tete-A-Tete, but I'm excited.
You should read my pieces on Bloody Elbow in the comments after. They're great.
Oh, I have.
The only response that was better was when I wrote a piece for Grappling Magazine, and I maligned every single British fighter. You could train for these fights on tea and crumpets, but so SFUK, the MMA underground, they just went crazy. They went crazy. Thought I was like hating on every British fighter. I was like, no, look, you guys need to relax. So great when we play. The band plays England all the time, and fighters always come to the show. At one point, the bouncer runs up to the stage, like after the show was over. He goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, man, we're just running through moves." Like some guy was like, "Come, hey, I got a new move," So I think everybody, is pretty good natured. So,
well, that's cool. Well, we'll have you back, Eugene. This was fun as hell. And
tell whoever is in control. I want to do a piece on Bloody Elbow about how America really hates winners.
Hey, I'm in control, and you can do that right away. Just let me know. Just write it up. We'll post it.
All right, I'll do it. I'll do it.
And anytime you want to write something on Bloody Elbow, just tell me. We'll post it.
Yeah, because this winner thing, after hearing all those boos, I think it's really timely. And nobody else is defending John Jones, so I'd like to be the first.
All right, well, I'm going to hold you to that, Mr. Robinson, and we'll be back. This was another edition of the MMA Tete-A-Tete. Luke Thomas will be in and out. His schedule's getting busier and busier as his star explodes. So we'll be cultivating some other guests like Eugene Robinson and some others. So let us know what you thought of Eugene. I enjoyed the shit out of it. So we'll be back next week.
My star will never explode, so I'll be around.
Excellent. I'm counting on you. All right, Eugene. Thanks a lot.